Welcome back, everybody. We are the Alter Ego Brothers. I'm Nick, that's Andy, and today we're talking about Michael. Now, I know we left you off last week, and we had some tensions between the two of us. We were really butting heads over Lee Cronin's The Mummy. And if you want to know how that went, here's a link to that video. But today is a brand new day, and this is a brand new movie. And so we're going to talk about it, all feelings put aside.
So don't forget to like and subscribe, and let's just jump into it.
I gave Michael a 6 out of 10. I think Michael doesn't do a whole lot to sway any sort of preconceived notions you have about the King of Pop. When going into the movie, you're going to have the same feelings coming out of the movie. That being said, this was a very entertaining, very energetic, and a very fun ride. I did like a lot of what I had to see.
I landed at an 8 out of 10. The story fell short for me, as well as the acting, and I think because of the story is why the acting fell short for me. But I know a lot of people are disgruntled because of the chronological timeline and when it ended in Michael's life. However, that's not what soiled my score at all, and so we'll get into that though.
And that puts us at a 7 out of 10. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about the story. And to kind of preface where we're at is we've watched a few musical biographies, and there's a couple different ends of the spectrum here. On the one hand, you've got Better Man, which portrays the individual that it's talking about, in that case, Robbie Williams, and it's very unafraid to dig into the nasty parts of his life and really bear everything for the audience to see and judge. We also have things like A Complete Unknown or Springsteen that are just like clear Oscar bait and don't really have much focus on the music side of things. And I think Michael really just kind of sits somewhere in the middle there. It leaves out a lot of the abuse that Michael had to endure and his brothers at the hands of their father, Joe Jackson. And it really throws all the positives at you at once and doesn't give you any sort of time to think about how things made him feel, how growing up, affected him and affected his music. It just kind of plays things over and over and over at you. And I think that's ultimately to its detriment. However, it's a very enjoyable experience going through all that. It just kind of makes a little bit of a mid movie, hence my 6.
I agree that this is an entertaining movie because as I'm sitting through it, I'm thinking this is a movie that I would recommend for friends to watch because I did enjoy it. But the reason I fell short is just because what you alluded to, where it has this constant positivity about it. And I'm going to guess a lot of that's the legal reasons, and they were refrained from being able to tell certain parts of Michael's life. It really lacks depth. That's where this movie lacks. It lacks the drama because all you see is Michael's career. Although you see some punishment from his dad and some abuse from his dad, you just see his career just keep going up and up and up. So are we saying that Michael's dad's abuse is working? Because we don't see that downfall. We don't see that moment. The only time that we see that was early on when his dad whipped young Michael in the butt. And we'll actually get into that in a little bit about the acting. I do know that the movie was supposed to have an alternate ending, and it was supposed to go to 1993. It's supposed to have a cop show up at his door, and it's supposed to cut to black at that moment. That got scrapped for a new ending that was just let's have 2 full-length songs back to back with each other, and to the point where it's just kind of you're awkwardly sitting through that. I'm not sure if this movie was worth it. Financially, it ended up being worth it because it grossed whatever the heck, the number. But realistically, I don't think it does Michael justice at all, even if you keep it in a positive light.
Yeah, and setting aside all of the legal things like Janet Jackson not wanting to be portrayed in the film, even though she was a huge part of his life, Diana Ross's whole part getting scrapped from the film, and there was another person that ended up pulling their likeness from the film, which caused reshoots. This film was supposed to come out last year, And there were extensive reshoots done because a lot of people didn't want to appear in the film or have their likeness portrayed in the film. And that is what it is, right? You can't really fault the movie for legally not being able to do what they were trying to do to begin with. So for what they had to work with, it was entertaining. It's just more of a concert than a movie, or like a jukebox playlist of like greatest hits over and over.
Yeah, like Biopic was like a miscategorization by the time they fully edited the movie. They probably needed to market a little bit differently, and I think maybe people would have judged the movie a little bit differently.
Moving on from the story bits, though, let's talk a bit about the acting. And of course, everybody's talking about Jafar Jackson and his portrayal of his uncle, Michael. And wow, they did a heck of a job, not only in the makeup department, but a little bit of CGI to enhance the facial features as well. And it kind of creeped me out how accurate it was. There were just times in the movie where I just kind of personally got like a little, whoa, ooh, okay. I know that's not Michael Jackson, but my brain thinks I'm seeing Michael Jackson. And it's just a little... It just weirded me out a little bit. The same with Joe Jackson and Coleman Domingo's portrayal of him. I thought that was an excellent portrayal. I love seeing Coleman Domingo work. We saw him last in The Running Man. He's really fun to watch. I really enjoy watching him as the antagonist in Michael. And I look forward to seeing, I think he's got a couple other things coming out this summer that he'll be in. So I'm looking forward to those as well.
Yeah, your point about Jafar's likeness to Michael Jackson, I looked up images online before the movie because I was just curious, like, who is playing Michael Jackson? And to learn that it's his nephew was super cool. That was super intriguing for me. And you would find online like side-by-side comparisons of them look alike. And I'm just like, that's AI. That's got to be AI or AI Michael Jackson. So it looks like Jafar a little bit more. No, they just look so freaking identical. It was uncanny. That's freaking awesome. They're able to get not only somebody that looks just like Michael Jackson, but also happens to be a relative. I thought that was a really cool part. And he actually performed and acted well too. That's the other crazy thing. I really want to give a shout out to Giuliano Valdi. He played younger Michael Jackson in the Jackson 5. Well, I would argue he might be the best actor out of the entire bunch. And there was a lot of great acting, but he in particular, the only moment in the entire movie where I actually felt some emotion was the moment when his dad whipped him with his belt, which is what I was alluding to earlier. The screams and the terror and the tears that came from him were just so authentic. And it triggered that mechanism, that defense mechanism in me. That it made it feel real, a little bit too real, all to the point where you made about Michael Jackson looking too real. That is like, you kind of didn't like it. I didn't like how he made me feel because it was a little too good. More and more, I'm seeing these younger actors, these kids just doing phenomenal jobs and sometimes outperforming the adults. I'm looking forward to the future of movies, if there is one. That's a depressing topic.
Yeah. And to expand on that, I think Giuliano had the hardest part in this movie because we go chronological order in this film. It's not like we're in the middle of Michael's career and we're flashing back. No, we start in Gary, Indiana with Michael as a kid, and it's Giuliano's job to get us, the audience, sat and into believing the circumstances that are going on right there, right then between Michael and his brothers. And he just does an outstanding job there. I think he really gets you into that character, into that world that they're trying to portray. And we don't really see Jafar for a good 20, 30 minutes. So that first half hour is really riding on Giuliano and his performance. So well done. I have a small point here about the CGI. I think there were points where it was done well, but overall, there were a lot of big CGI moments that just looked a little bad. So one of them was the Pepsi incident when Michael's hair caught on fire. The fire just did not look real whatsoever, and it was just kind of like, oh, really? For this budget, you couldn't get that done? Whatever. And then Bubbles was pretty poorly done, in my opinion, as were the rest of the animals at the house. Fun fact, Bubbles is still alive and is just like chilling out on a reserve somewhere.
Another fun fact, apparently chimpanzees live between 30 and 50 years. So
it tracks. The math tracks. The last thing I want to talk about, and I think what a lot of people will bring up, is the inconsistencies. So again, setting aside all the legal and story issues that they literally could not use, I do think there are some inconsistencies in with what they could use. We're missing out on the relationships between Michael and his brothers. You don't really see any of that. And very famously, like, Michael and Jermaine didn't get along in some of those early years. They were both having solo careers outside of the Jackson 5, and they were kind of battling out between each other. There was jealousy going on. We don't see any of that. The brothers, the actors were there. They looked like them. They were completely underutilized, and it was a shame. On the flip side, they were able to get Jonathan Moffat, who was the drummer for the Jackson 5 and Michael Jackson. They got his drum set correct. He has a very unique drum set, and whenever it showed up on stage, I made a mental note of, yeah, that's actually his drum set. So it's weird that they would have an attention to detail to something so minuscule and that didn't affect the movie at all, like this unique drum set that was being used. But at the same time, you have the brothers right there, and they're all just kind of pushed to the side. It made them all kind of feel useless. So I don't know. There was a lot more to that story that was just not there for me.
Yeah, I do praise a movie that actually has the musicians playing along to the music correctly, and they did it in this one. It depends on the department when it comes to consistency. When it comes to, I think, set design and some of those aspects, I think that the consistency was there. I think when they performed the songs, I think they legitimately performed the songs, and that made it a lot easier to edit because then no one was in a different time than another person, or they're just faking it. So however they did it, I thought that part was actually very consistent.
But as always, don't just take our word for it. Let's see what the internet has to say. I'm going to start with the critic side of things. I think very famously now at this point, there have been many, many articles about how the critics did not like this movie. And overall, they gave it a 4 out of 10. Whereas on the audience side of things, everybody seems to be saying, fuck you to the critics. And they gave it a 9 out of 10. Do you think this is going to be this year's Five Nights at Freddy's 2, where it's the widest gap between critic and audience reviews of the year?
Widest gap? I'm going to say yes. I'm going to go ahead and say it's early on in the year. I'm going to go ahead and say
it would
yes.
be really early to say that, but I kind of have a feeling that that's where this is going. This is not the movie I would have picked for that, but here we are. Okay, so because our score was more on the positive side of things, let's look at a more negative review and see what's going on down there.
What the hell's going on down there?
What the hell's going on down there? All right, so this is a 1 out of 10 review, and the title is Why I'm Rating This Film 1 out of 10. In my opinion, the 2026 film Michael does not fully explore Michael Jackson as a person. The focus is mainly on his performances and stage presence, which are already well known and widely documented. Overall, the film seems to avoid the more complex and challenging aspects of his personality. It does not ask difficult questions or explore the contradictions that would make the portrayal feel more complete. Because of this, the story comes across as simplified and somewhat polished. I think they mean unpolished. It feels like the film prioritizes presentation and visuals over a deeper understanding of the person behind the image. As a result, it comes across as a safe and surface-level interpretation rather than a thoughtful and detailed portrayal. For me, the film feels incomplete and does not deliver what I expected from a project like this. That is why I'm giving it a 1 out of 10.
I agree with what they said. I think their rating system is clearly a pass or fail, and it's only based on story. So, and from their rating scale, I understand why they went with the 1. Yeah, I do think, like, to his point, and I think he makes a great argument here, and I think to kind of symbolize it, like, this is very much looking at a bunch of album covers. We've seen Michael Jackson. We've seen him in when the light looks good on him. The purpose of a biopic is to see what's behind that closed door and just like peek around the corner and listen in like a fly on the wall. And we didn't really get much of that experience, if any. And that's why I think like the idea of it, calling it a biopic, is just a wrong marketing term for this film. And I think they probably could have had better ratings overall, even though the audience still liked it, and even more money, even though they still made a lot of money, if they didn't kind of pigeonhole themselves to the idea that this was a biopic.
There is a distinction in what was being given to us at this point. It seems more like just straight up musical-esque rather than biopic. And to your point, that's where it gets people, and I think that's where a lot of the critics fell off. And with that brings us to the close. Thank you so much for liking, commenting, and subscribing. We really appreciate it. YouTube really appreciates us when you do that, so thank you again. And remember, we're just two regular dudes
doing regular reviews.
Spoiler alert, he's dead.